Yeah, so my name's Jon Chase, and my job is a science communicator. Um, and one way I do that is through raps. So basically, a science communicator is someone who talks about science and takes research and relates it to people, basically, who aren't doing the research. And so one way I do that is through rapping. So I'm also considered as a science rapper. Okay, so I've had quite a long journey to get to where I am now, and so like at school I done all right. Went to college, didn't do so good. Thought I got to get out of college, go to university, maybe that'll work better for me. I got into university on a foundation course and was literally looking through the manual. They said, look, if you want to go to university, you've got to choose a course you think you could do, that you'd be interested in. So they gave me this big book from A to Z of all these courses. And I remember looking through it, my A's, I was just like, okay, aerospace engineering, right, that looks interesting. Oh, what's that about? Oh, learning about sending things to space. Yeah, I can make UFOs and spaceships. Okay, I'm down for that. Checked out archaeology, checked out architecture. I thought, yo, those look interesting. I didn't really get to the B's, the C's and D's. I maybe did, but I don't remember that because I only remember those three and those were all starting with A, so maybe that's as far as I got through it. But I thought, I'd do one of those, and I think aerospace engineering, could I do that? And I spoke to the person. They said, yeah, you could if you do a foundation year. You go in, you do a foundation year to get you up to speed because your A-level results weren't as good as you could have hoped. But, once you've done that, you can go straight into the course. So I was just like, you know what? I'll do that, man. I'm done with college. It's not working for me. I'm getting too distracted. Focus, go to university, new surroundings, let's do it. So I ended up doing a degree in aerospace engineering. And that was pretty cool. But took me a long time to finish that. And I think a lot of it is about having the right mindset and understanding what a degree is about and understanding the things you need to do and the focus you need to achieve it. And I didn't, I just done it because I was good at maths. I could handle the maths. It didn't bother me. So I kind of sailed through off that. But when you got some of the other skills you need to be holistic. You need to have, time management skills. You've got to be able to manage your work and be able to be disciplined, keep at it, not just do it now and again. And so all of the rounded skills I needed, I didn't have. And I had to learn to develop those over time. So by the time I finished that course, I didn't have the grades that I would have preferred and ended up going to do a whole different degree. I finished it, spoke to a lecturer and said, I need to do another degree because I want to do a master's. I'm not made for just sitting on this little degree, this little rubbish grade and just settling for that. I need to do better. And so he suggested I check out this next course because he saw what my mind was like. And that took me to Wales doing science and science fiction, which was basically the link between science and sci-fi about how they affect each other, how science gets into the science fiction and how science fiction affects the scientists and the work that they do. So I ended up doing that for 3 years, smashed it. I had my focus on, I understood what I should be getting out of university by then. So I went through and put the effort in, learned that discipline, got the grade I needed, and then was fortunate enough to apply for a scholarship to do the master's. Got the scholarship, and the master's ended up being science communication. So I ended up having a master's degree in science communication, smacked that up, got a distinction for that. And after that, it just kind of led me to where I am now, like through lots of lucky chances along the way, but a lot of hard work as well. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but worthwhile.
That's
Yeah, so when I tell anyone that I'm a science communicator, they're kind of like, what? Oh, you got something to do with like computers or like satellites and communications and stuff. And I'm like, nah, man, it literally is what it says on the tin. And when sometimes when you say to kids, what do you do? And they're like, what do I do? I'm a science communicator. And I say, what do you think that is? And they'll say, you communicate science? And I'm like, yeah, it's that simple. But you see us everywhere, and sometimes you don't even see us. You just see the stuff we do. So science communicators, like I said earlier, is people who take the research that scientists do, whether old or new, and we try and help the public to engage with it, to know about it, to learn about it. And we might do that through media. You might see us in magazines, we might write in stories in magazines, as science journalists. The guys on the news talking about science. Recently with COVID, you'd have seen a lot of science communicators, specialists who go out from where they're working. So they might be working in the field of medicine, and there'll be the particular people who will come out and try and share with you what they're doing, why it works, the problems with it, the benefits of it. So you see us everywhere. You see us at those science shows when you see people making things blow up and everyone's going, wow, those are science communicators. Like I said, magazines, like the media, we're everywhere, shows, doing workshops in museums. When you go to a science center, we're the guys who's explaining it to you. We're everywhere. So it's science communicators, we're pretty much all over the place, but no one's really heard of us. They just hear the stories and think that they're scientists telling it to them. And many of us have studied science and have science backgrounds, but some are specialist journalists who have enough knowledge to take the science and explain it to you. So yeah, we're that place in between the public and the researchers and the science. And so the misconceptions are normally that, you computer scientists? I'm like, no, we're that bridge between scientific research and the public. Like science works in a realm of terms and definitions, and although they can communicate to each other because they need to, so that they can share each other's research and learn of each other's research and also critique each other's research. But then when it comes to the public, and often you've got publicly funded science being done, and you got to justify that money. For example, you think of someone like NASA, they're paid for by the public funds. It's a government organization, and so you got to make that accountable. So you have to communicate what you're doing to the public. You can't just do it in some little room and not share what you're doing, and just use big words and things that people don't understand, so they can't really engage with it. You want people to engage with it. You want them to buy into what you're doing, to understand what you're doing, and also have a say in what you're doing. If they don't think it's right, they should be able to say, we don't think you should be doing research in genetic modification. We're worried about it. And then you need someone to be able to step out and say, well, actually, these are why we're doing it. We could feed like 100,000 people rather than 100 people. There's countries that's going through hunger. They're going through droughts, and we're going to make food that's more drought resistant. But then you have to help the public to understand what it is you're doing and the risks and the benefits. And then if enough of the public are saying we really don't agree with that, then scientists, they'll generally sit down and listen and think, right, people aren't wanting it. We need to think about how we can reassure people, because there's no use to trying to do something and feed it to people and say, you'll be fine, and then 10 years later finding out that they wasn't. Scientists need to be stringent, and they generally are. They put things through a lot of tests. They do a lot of research into it. They're never 100% perfect. They work within statistical balances. So, you might need a 99% or 99.5% works. But there's always that 0.5, 0.05, 0.005% that you won't be able to study. And obviously with coronavirus now, they can't study what would be the effects in 3 years' time because it hasn't been around that long. But they can tell you within the region, they tested this much people and this much people are okay. So it's helping people to understand that, how science works and the actual science being done. Yeah, so there's quite a lot because I've taken on, because the type of work I do is really varied. So like I said, I'm a science rapper, so I'll take an idea or a topic or an area and I'll try and get it across to the public by putting it into a rap. So the first one I done was for NASA, and it was about astrobiology, and that was basically about studying life in space, or aliens basically, but the scientific search for them and the questions you need to ask and the types of technology and science you need to be able to investigate and answer them questions. But when I've written, so I've written some books as well. So for example, I've written The Science of Star Wars, and that was challenging because you've got a whole movie which is based on fantasy, but there's elements in it that you can relate to the real world. And if you have an understanding of science, you can understand why something is or isn't possible. A classic example is, would you hear lasers being shot in space? Would you hear the explosions? And the answer is no, because sound doesn't travel through the vacuum of space. But you need to know that to be able to say, hang on, you wouldn't hear that, you wouldn't hear those blasters. And we, the humans, didn't always know that sound would or wouldn't travel in space. This is something they had to investigate. They had to create regions with a vacuum with no particles in it and see if the sound traveled. And you can set up experiments, and I think they do it in schools now as well, where you've got a bell, like a glass jar, and you put a bell inside it, suck out all the air, and then you set the bell ringing, and you just can't hear it. But these things have to be discovered, and once you understand it or know it, then you can look at Star Wars and say, oh, that wouldn't be true. But to be honest, it's the way we look at the world is an interesting thing, because we've always been looking at the world and we didn't always have science to do it. And when you learn science at school, you get a bit of knowledge, a bit of insight about how to look at the world. And some people excel at it, some people shy away from it. And my job is to come in and try and help you feel, you know what, you might shy away from it because you might not be comfortable with the equations, but let me help you to understand and explain why this makes sense. Let me try and break it down to you in a way that you can understand. Let me use examples from your life, from your reality, and hopefully to help people to grasp it. So the Star Wars book was challenging because we don't have lightsabers, they don't exist. How do you grab science that doesn't exist yet? How do you try and describe it using science that does exist? And some of that science that people don't really understand at all. So you have to simplify that, break it down in a way that they can understand, and then show them how it could relate to it. So all of that can be real challenging, man. And like recently, like we've done the science of Harry Potter as well, which I found a bit easier than the Star Wars one. But then the most challenging one was the most recent one, which is like the science of Jurassic World. And that's coming out literally this year. And I had to learn a whole lot about dinosaurs and stuff I didn't really know before. I had to learn a lot of principles that they use that I wasn't surrounded by. And I had to speak to some scientists and read a lot about it and enroll myself in these little free online courses just so I could feel comfortable with it, and then back that up by reading up around it. So I had to do a whole lot of work to kind of get to pin down what was going on with that. So that was extremely challenging, I won't lie. Because I was thinking about this, and like obviously there's lots of people who do things in different ways and for different reasons, and like you might see someone and you think, oh, I like the way they explained that. And when you say public scientists, I've got to be aware that I would have come in contact with more scientists watching more programs, and so I'd have all these names that might be kind of, who's that? But the names I'd probably put forward, probably from America, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Obviously, because he's a man of color, he's heading up, like working in a museum over there, like heading up. And also he's doing talks, and he's public and he's visible and he's challenging, and he's himself, and he shows a different perspective of what it means to be a scientist, and he's in a prominent position and has respect from his colleagues. And then there's also people in Britain, for example, like Maggie Aderin Pocock, and she's basically on Sky at Night, and she's basically, I think, probably I'd say the first Black presenter on Sky at Night, and she's from an engineering background as well, space engineering, space scientist, and she's been doing outreach work and working with the public for ages, and so she deserves to be there. And also another guy called Jim Al-Khalili, and he makes real good programs, real interesting programs, and touches on subjects that people don't normally look at all the time. For example, he looked at science and Islam, which I thought was brilliant, just helping people to understand the history that Muslim scientists, Islamic scientists had to play in the history of science that people often overlooked. And he's done some great programs as well. So I'd say those people off the top of my head. Yeah. Yes, when I was at school, I'd say my most powerful subject was maths. I was like this maths whiz. I was just like, bam. People give me stuff, I'm like, bam. Give me another one, bam. And I remember from when I was like young, like primary school, I used to just sit down like this with my head, just a piece of paper, my head like 3 or 4 inches above the paper, and I'd just be going through sums. Give me another one. I don't want to talk to no one. I don't want a conversation. I just want to get on with this. And I was very much that kid. But as I got older, like natural ability became less of a thing. Sometimes you just got to learn how to do something. And I like to work things out. And that isn't good when you're trying to do exams, because you'll spend time working it out and having fun doing it. But actually in an exam, you just need to be able to know, apply this rule to that, make it happen next. And so as time went on, my maths ability wasn't recognized in the same way. So I was always put in the wrong groups. They'd always put me in a group below because I'd like have a laugh, catch and joke with people. But I was good at maths. And so when it came to the exam and they realized, rah, we got this guy in the wrong group. Like I remember one time I got 100% in a test and they just went, I got called in, they said, oh, can you do this harder test? I was like, all right. And then I done that harder test and like, we got like one of the highest marks on that as well. And it was just like, yeah, we got this guy in the wrong group. And that happened to me twice. You know, when I moved from primary school to another primary school, they put me in the wrong place and I had to bump me up a couple books when they realized my abilities. And when I went to high school, the same thing happened again. And so I realized, you know, your outlook and the way you behave can give people the wrong impression of you. And sometimes being lackadaisical, not putting in that work to make people think you're hardworking and can achieve it. They think, oh, they wouldn't be able to achieve it, you know. But then when you blow their minds out of the water, they think twice. So maths was my thing. Drama was my best grade at school. My best grade was actually drama. And then after that, I say science. I enjoyed doing science. My grades are all right. But again, it's about application. You've got to apply yourself to get the good grades. You've got to put in the effort. You've got to put in the work to learn it and learn how the system works so you can get those marks and pass those tests. If you sit there and think you know it all, you'll inevitably fail. And no matter how good you are, you need to be able to have a certain balance of the skills to be able to achieve these things. And so, yeah, those are my good ones. The one I was rubbish at was English. Yeah, never had time for it. I was like, you can understand me, I can talk, who cares? Yeah, but that didn't do me too well. So I had to learn that lesson as I got through university and learned that actually I have to boost my English skills to be able to do this coursework. And then I did, and then was able to achieve. And now I'm writing books, so yeah. Yeah, so over time, so when I first started doing it, so I didn't know I was doing it. When I started my degree in Wales, it was like 2004. And I didn't know it was science communication. It was just I was learning about stuff and I was interested in it. And then one of the modules in the final year was science communication. And at the time, I didn't value it. I didn't think the lecturer really sold it to me. It just made it kind of sucked the life out of it for me. And so I was kind of like, oh, I'm not going to do that. But then the actual professor of the course, right, he just approached me one day and said, you know, would you consider doing that for the masters? And I went, oh, it was boring. And he just sat back and went, okay. I was just like, right. It seems like there's something in there. When he said that, it seems like I'm missing something. So I looked into it and ended up studying it and then doing it. So that was like 2007 or 2008. And you got to remember, YouTube only kicked in about 2004. So this was this new idea where people are making videos and just throwing them up. And that was a new thing. And so all of the learning we would have done of science communication wasn't about YouTube. It was about everything else. But as YouTube became the phenomenon it is now, you started to realize that, oh, you know, people can put videos up there and you can go and watch other people putting up videos. And it changes from formal stuff like the BBC or ITV have made something and you watch it. Now anyone's making it, man. It's someone in their backyard just making stuff like. And so that has changed the way science can be presented to the public. And people are doing lessons on there. People are doing fun experiments. They're doing demos. They're doing shows. They're doing documentaries. And now they're making programs especially for it. You know, and it's not just that. Now you've got Netflix, you've got everything. So the whole realm has changed because you've got more people who's able to communicate to you, and you've got more people that you can access as a member of the public. And they're not just based in your area, and it's not just the BBC. It's people from America, Australia, India, Brazil. You can check people from the whole world. Whatever you're into, it's there for you to find. And so, yeah, I'd say the landscape has changed. And now with Twitter and TikTok, people are doing little science bits on TikTok and Twitter. They're having all conferences via Twitter where they're putting up their arguments and their papers. And so people are using social media in whole new ways because they have to, you know, you've got to communicate to the public. You've got to go to where the public is. Not expect them to come to you all the time, but go to them on their level, and the public use what they use. And it's up for us, people like us, the science communicators, to adapt to what the public are into. So yeah, it has changed with all of the technology and the different types of media we've got. Absolutely. Yeah, so if someone wanted to get into STEM, this would be my number one key bit of advice, okay? Be interested in it. So, and I know it sounds like an obvious thing, but your interests carry you far. Your interest will take you everywhere. Because, for example, you've never had to ask, no one's ever had to be asked to play a computer game. Like, oh, come on, son, you must play that computer game. Generally, it's people playing them computer games because they like it. And they will keep failing, they'll keep losing, they'll keep falling off that building or whatever. And they'll always go back for more. They'll keep doing it until they pass it. But when it comes to studying, tests, and things that learning, people fall back on the first failure. They're like, oh, I can't do this. But actually, if you've got an interest, you'll get back up and you'll try it again. So if you're into astronomy, you look up at the stars, man. You ain't got a telescope. You just look at the stars with your eyes and you learn about the constellations. And then when you feel you want to take it further, you try and get that money for that telescope. You ask that family member, don't buy me clothes. Can you guys put the money together to get a telescope? Or, and these things don't occur to you when you're younger. You don't realize that you can ask people to help you fund your passions. And if you've been doing it for the past 2 or 3 years, you probably won't need to ask them. They'll know what your passion is and they'll be looking to buy it for you, So the things you're into, you have to really build up your passion in it. And ways to do that is watch programs, watch documentaries. If you want to learn about whales and stuff, you watch a documentary about whales and then you find another one and you don't have to wait for it to come on television. You can go on YouTube and you can find 101 whale documentaries presented by 101 different people in a way you might like or a way you might not like. So you've really just got to embrace anything you're into and surround yourself in it fully. And don't worry about whether your friends are into it or not. You check your friends when it's time to check your friends. So when you get back home, you make time to sit and put that documentary on because it will bring you joy. Because ultimately in your life, you've got to bring yourself joy and don't wait for everyone else to give it to you. So whatever you're into, whatever aspect of STEM you're into, surround yourself with it. Watch documentaries, watch programs about it. It's not necessarily all about just doing the equations and working through the sums. Sometimes it's about just lifting your spirits with it. Because once you're lifted, I guarantee you'll seek out the sums. And when you find difficulty with them, you'll seek out the website to help you with it. You'll find a YouTuber who helps to explain it and break it down easy for you. And if that one doesn't work, try another one. There's hundreds of them out there. So don't give up. Make sure you use the technology that you have nowadays that weren't around 20 years ago. And use it to your advantage and just embrace it, man. So if you want to get into STEM, first build up that passion and do the things that you're into and let it fulfill you and fill your body and your mind, and you'll find yourself coasting through it. And another tip I'd say as well, when you're at school, when you find something might be difficult, you're studying a science subject and it's hard, here's a little tip. If you can find out what that teacher's going to be doing in the next lesson, just ask them, sir, miss, what are you going to be doing the next lesson? Are we going to be learning about isotopes? You'd be like, okay, I don't know anything about that. Go home, type it in, isotopes, watch a video. Look for a fun video, fun way to learn about isotopes. Then watch another one, watch 3 or 4 or 5 videos and go, okay, I got an idea now. When you go into that class now, you won't be sitting there scratching your head. You're going to be watching the teacher talk to you about the stuff you just looked at. And any questions you had when you was looking at it, now you can ask the teacher. And your teacher will be impressed that you're asking them a question that's relevant to what they're teaching. And now you'll seem like that person in a class who has all the clever answers or has all the clever questions. And that will boost your self-esteem, not being someone who's feeling like they're drowning in class, but someone who feels like they're in control in that class, that they're bossing that class because they've looked into it before. So that would be my tip. Try and get the stuff into your head before in ways that work for you. And anything you don't understand, then you can ask the teacher. And that will really help you in your studies and whatever level you're at. You know what I mean? Like they've put flying machines on Mars, man. So it's like you can watch it lift off and stuff. So like this is the generation we're in now. You can watch stuff like people watch moon landings live and then query whether it's real or not, and that's their business. But nowadays, the technology is getting us places, and people always doubt, but the truth is, it's there for you to investigate yourself, man. You don't have to believe anyone else. You can check it out for yourself. But just make sure you check the right sources and don't get caught in this that bubble where you just find all the programs that support what you believe in. You got to find things that challenge your way of thinking as well, because that's the only way you'll learn and grow, is to be challenged. Yeah, it's the classic conspiracy theories, because people, when they're entrenched in a belief, what they do is they look for things to support. to confirm their ideas. They don't look for things to challenge them. And so when you're looking for things to confirm your ideas, you find it and you kind of learn to ignore the other stuff that don't. And part of it's because, you know, it doesn't make you feel good. Why would you seek something that doesn't make you feel good? And I get it. And sometimes people will seek others in a community. So for example, people who believe in a flat earth, people who believe the moon landings were faked, people who believe that 5G gives you coronavirus, and whatever it might be, okay? People have their beliefs and it's fine, you know, like you got a right to believe what you want to believe, but you've also got a right to not be fooled by people. And people sometimes settle themselves in an area because they just want to hold fast to a belief system or thought. And actually they can't really think that of the possibility that they're being fooled. And each of the people who are supporting that might be getting fooled, and they might be fooling themselves or being fooled by someone who really doesn't know what they're talking about. People speak half-truths that sound right, and so you run with it because it makes you feel good. But really, sometimes you got to sit back and go, you know what, I believe this, but I'm open for other explanations. And I think that goes both ways. You know, for someone who might say they don't believe in God, you know, they'll have their reasons they don't believe in that, but also be open for the possibility that one day you might find this alien like life form that comes down and you're like, rah, everything everyone says about God, that has all of the things like the technology. And you know what, if we went back about, you know, 10,000 years or 30,000 years, the things we can do now would possibly seem like gods to people. We can heal wounds, like we can set things back, we can knock people out and bring them back awake, you know, and they was using anesthetics for thousands of years, you know. But the fact is we have technology that makes us seem like superior in our knowledge. And I think people sometimes feel inferior because of the amount of knowledge that's out there, and they feel that, well, I don't know any of that, and you know, I got to push that away. I think they might be trying to dupe me because I just don't get it. But I say, do you know what, it's okay for different ideas to be out there, but be prepared to sit down, have yourself challenged, but also look into things yourself. Don't look at the same things and the same people. Go, you know what, let me find the opposite argument and try and reason myself through why they have that argument. And so I have sat down and reasoned through why flat earthers believe the world is flat. And I've spoken to a few guys, and I've gone, you know what, I'm genuinely interested in what you're saying. I'm not here to tell you you're talking rubbish. I'm just here to hear what you've got to say. And I'll look at it and I'll try and help you see why I don't believe that. But I ain't here to argue and say you're wrong and I'm right. I'm just here to argue, look, this is the evidence that I'm looking at to make me feel that. And to help them to see that. But I'd really like to help to see their viewpoint. And if I find a problem with their viewpoint, I'll say, it doesn't add up for me, man. I'd need something to check there. But I think you must always be open to other people's viewpoints. Sometimes it can get long, arguing back and forward about stuff, but I do think it's vital that we take on other people's views, because there's always a chance that we miss something. And you only find that by taking on the people who's looking at it from a whole different perspective from you. So yeah, there are difficult topics, but and difficult things to broach, but sometimes that's because of the mindset the people are in, the audience are in, that they just don't want to hear what you're saying, so they won't take it on. And sometimes it's because it's generally hard, but I always believe you can bring it a little bit closer to their understanding, and also acknowledge that I won't know it perfectly myself. I might talk about space, but there's scientists out there who know a whole lot more than me. I'm learning from them. So, you know, I only know a little bit. And I've got to realize that there'll be bits I'll miss, things I'll get wrong, things I think I knew, then I realized, oh my gosh, I was getting that wrong all this time. You know, none of us are infallible. So yeah, man, there's difficult subjects, but you know, it's just part of life, isn't it?
Man, that's...
Yeah, no, that's a mad question, because, okay, so the basic answer would be, I probably, based on how I am now, I wouldn't change anything, because I wouldn't have become the person I am now, the challenging person I am. If I'd done everything right then, I wouldn't have gone to do a second degree. I would have got my aerospace engineering degree. I'd have been an aerospace engineer and I'd be working in it. And all of this aspect of me would not have been seen. This aspect of me is a result of the mistakes in my past that I've had to oversee and overcome to make me the person I am now. You know, like I learned to DJ at an early age with my brethrens. Like, so when school was happening, like the last years of school, that's when I started to learn to DJ. And that carried me through college, carried me through university, DJ'd at university, probably more than I should have. And then, you know, got into next university, wasn't DJing as much, but rapping, because I'd learned a bit about rapping and doing lyricism and meeting freestylers. So it led me to the ability to be able to rap about science, to combine these things that I can do, which led me to get lots of work doing it, which enabled me to be freelance and self-employed as a guy who uses rap for science, so therefore is employable, because, you know, this is down with the kids, or, you know, this is appeals in a way that people don't normally have. So it's hard to say I'd change anything, but that's just based on who I am now. If I was going to say, out of the goals I would like to have achieved back then, what would I have changed? So back then I wanted to be this big inventor, you know, this guy who can invent anything and go exploring around the world like Indiana Jones. The things I would needed to have changed were my discipline. For example, knowing that if I've got work to do, putting time aside for it and saying, right, I'm going to get this done. You know, before I go out and see my mates, before I do this, I'm going to try and get that work done. My timekeeping, you know, valuing being on time. I was just always kind of just, I'd get there and I'd be a bit late. You know, I was always just walking through the school gates late. You know, I wouldn't leave half an hour early and get there early and be waiting around in the playground. I was always the kid walking in late, walking into class late, missing registration. And I didn't value that. When they start a story, start walking into the cinema and missing the first 5 minutes of your favorite Marvel movie. You missed that first 5 minutes, you've missed the setting. Of course you can catch up with it, but there will always be that thing in the back of your mind, like, you know, what was it introduced at the start? You know, was that the purpose of the whole movie? You know, if you're into Star Wars and you miss the start of Star Wars, you'll miss the whole thing of like Darth Vader coming in and like holding man up, and like you'll miss all those first things, and you join it later and you just have that little bit missing. And that's the same thing if you're going to college, university or school. You miss that start of the class, the teacher has planned to set it up and told you what they're going to be doing, and so you miss that. You're going in halfway, you're playing catch up, and you're spending the rest of that hour trying to catch up rather than being on top of it and being the boss of it. And so that's what I would have changed. And like I said before, if I would have known now what I knew then, I would have tried to find out what I was doing in the next class, so I was on top of it. Tried to work through things at a pace which enabled me to go into the class expecting stuff rather than being surprised by everything they're saying. That would have been a big bonus. And it doesn't work with everything, for example, but I think you just got to work on your skills, because for some of you, it might be English. For me, I don't think back then anything could have got me more interested in English. It just wasn't something that settled in my brain. Like, how come they getting the right answers and I'm not? And I do think that a big aspect of it is my parents are from Barbados, you know, so they speak English, but they don't speak the same English that they expect me to do in class. So I haven't got as much role models for that way that those words are said. The words don't just fly out of my mouth onto the page. The words that are entering my mouth and the syntax and the way things are said are based on what I hear my parents saying and my friends around me. And they might have Jamaican parents, Ghanaian parents, Nigerian parents, all the parents from different places. My friends who have Pakistani parents or Indian parents, they will have certain lingos that are based on their parents. And so they're speaking English, but not the same English that you could use in the class. And so it won't naturally flow out. You won't naturally get all those answers. So you might have to work a bit harder. You might have to listen closely to Trevor McDonald, listen to more Trevor McDonald, listen to more people who are speaking the language in a way that you need to understand it to be able to succeed in an English class. You need to be reading those books and feel that you can relate with them. Shakespeare, cool, you know, but you need to be given books that you can relate with. So just because you're at school and not relating with what they're giving you, doesn't mean you can't go home and find a book. Find a book. Go and find a book about a subject you're into. If you don't like a big book, find a simple book, an intro to book, because those books will change everything. You know, an intro to Egyptian hieroglyphics, if that's what you want to know, or an introduction to African history. You know, you go and find the thing, just a little introduction, and don't try and read the whole book. Just read a page or two and go, oh, I like that. You know, I'm interested in that. Find the books you're interested in to encourage your reading, and then you'll take the next book. Then you get through the whole series, and then you're like, right, you know, I'm kind of into these books. And then you get the next big book, and you go, right, this book's big, but you know, I feel like I can take it on. And you might not finish it. Like, I've got books there I've only read like 2 chapters out of, you know, and I wanted to read the rest, and then I just got into something else, and then I ended up reading a bit I liked, and then I found something else, and I got into it, and I was reading. You know, you don't always finish all the books, but as long as you're interested and motivated to read, you'll start reading more. and then you won't be threatened by it. And now you're a master of your own knowledge, or mistress of your own knowledge, whichever way you see it. You know, you control your fate based on the words that you allow to enter your brain through your own reading. You know, and those will give you bigger words, and they'll give you more vocabulary, and you'll be able to use that in English class. You'll be able to tell stories in a way because you get used to how stories meant to sound. You know, so yeah, I'd say yeah, basically it's hard, but like, yeah, you have to struggle on with stuff. You know, you got to push through and find things that work for you, and that will stretch you to that next level.
Damn.
All right, so it's a classic one. Okay, so it's a space one that's used by loads of people. Okay, so like there's more stars in the universe, in space, than there are grains of sand on every beach on the whole of planet Earth, which is kind of crazy, right? So if you counted up every single grain of sand on a beach, then you counted up every grain of sand on every other beach across the whole planet Earth, there's more stars in space than all of those grains of sand. And some guys actually researched it and looked into it, and they discovered, yeah, there's about 10 to 10,000 like grains of sand. No, it's 10 to 10,000 stars for every grain of sand you could count on all the beaches. But then someone told me another fact. They said there's more molecules of water in a cup of water than there are stars in the whole entire universe. I was just like, wow, man, there's more molecules there. So basically the science of the big and the small is just mind-boggling. But those are some crazy facts. And I probably got loads of others, but like, those are two off the top of my head that I think are quite crazy.